If you're enjoying the Health Geeks Book Club podcast, we'd appreciate if you hit the subscribe button, leave a like, rating, or review, whichever your preferred podcatcher platform allows.
This edition of our podcast is brought to you by 360 Health and Well Balanced Nutrition.
Welcome to the Health Geeks Book Club podcast. Listen in as Kristen Norton and Eleanor Russell review all those great health and wellness books you've been wanting to read or you have read and want to talk about. Here's Kristen and Eleanor.
Hey everyone, Kristen here. I'm here with Eleanor, and today we have a very special guest with us. We have author Amanda Chay, an entrepreneur, lifelong health nut who has helped countless businesses and individuals put their health first. Amanda's own battle with lupus, which often drives her bonkers, has fueled her passion for helping women with lupus, and one of the reasons she wrote the Girlfriend's Guide to Lupus, How to Control Your Shitty Diagnosis. And we are honored to have her on to talk about this book with us. Welcome.
It's hot off the press, too, isn't it? 2023?
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. It just came out.
We might be the first ones to read it.
That's right. That's right.
Thank
you guys for having me here. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. I was kind of curious about the fact that you moved to North Carolina. So are you?
Yeah.
Where from did you move? I didn't quite figure that out.
We came from Tampa last. I was born in the Midwest and have kind of moved around a few states there, tried out the warm temperatures for a while, and then moved on up here.
Yeah, we're happy to have you with us in the Are you in the Piedmont or are you in the mountains or at the ocean?
I'm out in Raleigh.
Oh, that's where my son is. That's
so
a
close.
good town.
Triangle.
Good town. There we go.
Yes. The Cary area, the suburbia of
Raleigh,
North Carolina.
Well, you're getting ready to see a beautiful fall. It's getting ready to come in here for us. But let's get on to the topic here about this condition that you're living with. It sounds like 5 million people worldwide have lupus, but 100.5 million Americans, which is
1.5.
Yeah,
1.5.
0.45% of the population. So
yeah, not a lot.
Yeah. But those of you that haven't, I read in here something about a tattoo and a butterfly, and you just flippantly said that. But then when I was looking up lupus, can you tell me a little bit about the butterfly tattoo? Is it a purple? Is the Lupus Foundation a purple butterfly?
Yes, the symbol. So there are 11 criteria that are used by the American College of Rheumatology to diagnose lupus, and you have to have 4 of the 11. And one of them is a butterfly rash across the face.
Gotcha.
It goes over the nose. And that's why a butterfly is a symbol of lupus, and purple. I don't know, maybe that color was just available that day. They picked purple because 90% of all people who have lupus, the most common type of lupus, which I have, and the most severe, which is SLE, are women. So, they thought women like purple and we like some butterflies with that rash, and let's do it.
Yeah. I heard a lecture, maybe 15 or 20 years ago called The Mask of the Wolf. And it was a tremendous lecture. It was one of the first introductions I'd had to lupus, from an academic point of view. And it was pretty powerful. You are challenged with many things. And like you said, there's not like a straightforward diagnosis. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about, you suffered from autoimmune diseases, like a constellation of them, but you were late in getting a diagnosis. Like you said, 2021 was when you got the official one? And this is 23, so for 2 years you've officially had it.
Officially, yeah. I've had it, as long as my oldest daughter has been around. Her name is Anna, who also has lupus. I have had lupus, and it is because of this really, really extreme, hard pregnancy that I believe that it came on, and all the symptoms, began to arise after that. But, I think part of it is that I was a very stubborn woman. As Kristen may know, I'm a very active woman. And so I would blame things like my joints hurting on all these sports I played in college or CrossFit or mixed martial arts. And I would just be like, no, this is just my pain I've gone through, or I've ate too much sugar. It's my fault. I took a lot of this internally. I did get one autoimmune disease diagnosis called Sjogren's, which most commonly attacks the eyes and the mouth moisture cells. And, the interesting thing I've never mentioned was at that time, I got tested and it said I had Sjogren's, but it also said 100%, I remember the statistic, 100% that I have neonatal lupus. And the doctor is like, well, you're not a baby, so obviously you don't have this. And we never looked at it again, right? Neonatal lupus is something that babies get, that they grow out of, that comes on from the hormones given from their mom during pregnancy. And, that was never, it was just dismissed. And I'd even mention it. I've been through several rheumatologists. I'd mentioned it before, and the doctor was like, what's up with that? And I'm like, I don't know. But as I had Sjogren's, my rheumatologist at the time would keep asking me things like, hey, are you losing a lot of hair? And I'd be like, my hair? No. Why? You can just envision me like stroking my hair. No. Or do you have any lung issues, like lung infections? And I'm like, no. Why? Or do you have have you had heart issues or chest pain? And she would ask me this every time. And so I got like a complex, right? I'm like, what's going on? And that's how I knew. I figured out, right? They said neonatal. She kept asking me these questions, and I knew underneath that they thought I had lupus, but they were just waiting for one more of those factors to show up. And when it was called an ANA, a blood test, which an ANA, when that turned positive, she was like, okay, that's it. I'm sending you on. I can't help you anymore. I mean, in the kindest way. She was a wonderful rheumatologist, but she's like, okay, Duke and UNC have some great lupus clinics. We're going to get you into one of those because you need to go get extra help. And then just kind of rose from that.
Now, this being such a new diagnosis to you, and you said in the book you really never thought you would be an author. So tell us a little bit about what inspired you to yep, I'm going to write a book now.
Well, I like to think of myself as a resourceful woman. So when I was diagnosed, I was lonely, right? I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what I was up against. I knew no one that had lupus. I was just kind of out there. And as you read in the book, my husband was like, we're going to be okay. We're going to get through this together. And I'm like, screw you. You don't have to go through this. Get away from me. I just wanted someone to be like, I got you. It sucks. Come here. And that's really why I wrote the book. I just had this idea one day, and I am usually a little bit more anal on let's see, how does one write a book? Let me spend a month researching it. Let me get a little, outline. But instead, I just simply sat down and started writing.
You were inspired.
I guess, yeah. I'm grateful for it, because if I looked and saw how little authors make, or how much money you would spend to actually get that book in your hands, I would probably be like, what? No way. But for some, fire deep inside me was there, and it pushed me through. And it was really hard writing a book while being sick. I was sick often. I was sick very deeply, and some of the sickest I'd been in my life, and I couldn't barely function, and I still kept on writing a book. I mean, I gave myself breaks, so I'm no masochist. I needed those breaks when I called on it, but I was so grateful to be done and have this book out on paper.
Yeah.
But the one of the biggest lessons, there are many, but one of my biggest lessons is the idea of done is better than perfect.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Because perfect is never done. And
Right.
I have a hard time looking at my book now, because there's so many things on formatting. I might want to do this, or I'm afraid if I see it again, there might be a word that's missing. And my girlfriend's like, do you want me to tell you? And I'm like, you better not tell me. I tried the very best I could. That's right.
I think
that's how you spell the word. It's okay.
I think it's great, but I would be the same way. I would want to go back and tweak it every single time. But I think
too much. You're too close.
Yeah. Well, it's a labor of love, truly, and you call it the Girlfriend's Guide. And as I was reading it, it really did feel like this is a warm hug for anybody with lupus. But also, I think, and just this conversation could be helpful to anybody who's been diagnosed with a chronic illness or an autoimmune issue, especially one that is tricky to diagnose, or there's not a lot of people, or it's confusing even to doctors, right? That's a weird and hard place to be in.
Yeah, Amanda, I think you have a background in counseling, a master's degree, right? And you have a stress reduction and mindfulness training company that you're still doing? Yeah, and when you were talking about the rheumatologist, you have also comments in here, and I was just aching when you say things like, there are not enough of these providers out there, and there are not enough of them in school coming out. So you want to talk a little bit about access to the kind of help people might need and how hard it is to find? Because you give some really good tips on how to navigate that, and I think that's a wonderful gift to people.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm grateful that in this body of mine, I am tenacious in fighting for my health. I don't know what it is. I just feel like, no, you didn't, so many times where I'm like, no, and that doesn't mean that I have not put up with, at times, subpar care. I've had one, not my current one. She's lovely, but my past one, she was not good. She in fact had been fired for the role that she was in as in the rheumatologist field. But I put up with it because I knew I currently didn't have any other options. And that's a very scary place. When we feel we don't have control, that allows us to deepen our fear. And so the idea is, yes, rheumatology is only increasing in the needs. And yes, the rheumatologists are dwindling for a multitude of reasons. And that leaves you, one, with having to rely on a rheumatologist that is either subpar or far away from where you live. Or you may have to wait a considerable amount of time. While the research may say a few months, we live in a great area in Raleigh where there's access to multiple universities, teaching universities, medical care, and I still waited 8 months to get into my current rheumatologist. 8 months. Can you imagine 8 months of feeling like shit, that think that there's something wrong with me? I know it. It's not just lupus. I know I have maybe I've got cancer. You ruminate on these thoughts, and it's overwhelming, and every day is such a hard challenge. So I'm grateful that you found that any of those tips were helpful. But I just think that knowing deep in your heart that you deserve great care, and that you pick up that phone call again, you ask national resources, you ask recommendations, you just go on and on and on until you get what you need.
Yeah. And you also talk about primary care providers not being as well versed in how to help you. And so that puts another layer of delay, I think, in getting to the right provider.
Absolutely. And I think I think the primary cares, the PCPs mean well.
Oh, sure they do.
I had gone to, and I love my PCP, and I had gone to her and said, hey, look, I can't get into my rheumatologist. I need you to write me a steroid pack. But I wasn't well versed then on what type, the amount needed. And she gave me a dose that maybe someone who had poison ivy would need. So it was really high. And if you found me the day before my college girlfriends were coming into town, I sang Beyonce, all the single ladies, all day long in my head. And I cleaned my house obsessively. And I know now it was because the steroids were messing with my brain so much. I had said to my husband, he was out of town, and I'm like, I really think I have to go to the ER. I could not control myself. I was in such a manic, oh my God, phase. And I had said to my my PCP, at that time, I'm like, something's wrong. I feel crazy. And she's like, yeah, that's a side effect. And now I know to be like, oh, hell no, I will never take such a high dose of this prednisone. I've learned these things. It was very painful, but you have a well-intended physician who means the best and is going to help you the best she can, but perhaps sometimes they're just not aware of it.
Yeah, Tim's over here laughing about something. I thought you might have had a similar experience.
Did you sing Beyonce too?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and speaking of Tim, he's a guy, and good for him and their gender. This disease doesn't seem to hit them as hard as women, like you said, right? And so at one point,
it's not as frequently, but it does hit them harder.
Oh, okay, good point. But I was thinking that the title of this is the Girlfriend's Guide, but in the middle of it, who's going to talk to the men about the ones that have lupus? And I thought, wait, okay, that's somebody else's job. You're talking to the girls, so I think your title was helpful.
Yeah.
One of the other things that we've talked about, or we haven't talked about that we need to talk about, is eating. I mean, we all eat every day, and so you have lupus, so you still have to eat. And you learn some things about nutrition. Did you talk to any professionals about that we might know?
Well, there's one who's on the podcast with you.
Oh,
Her
really?
name is Kristen. Yeah,
She may have interviewed me for the book.
Yes, yes. I spoke to Kristen. I'm sure there's a plethora of, RDs out there, but
Yes.
I wanted one who I knew was down to earth and would give advice that would be very helpful. So yes, I did speak to Kristen, who gave me perfect tips that I have placed in the book. And I spoke to a woman who goes by the name of the lupus dietitian, Tanya, as well. I think that if we learned the basics behind how we needed to eat, we would be more likely to do it. And so I was pleasantly surprised that you don't need to be gluten-free or paleo or, carnivore diet. In fact, you probably should follow something similar to an anti-inflammatory diet that benefits many other people, like those with heart disease as well. And so that was a big relief to me.
Yeah. And while I couldn't talk specifically about lupus because that's not my specialty, we got to talk about how to eat more plants and vegetables. And I shared one of my all-time favorite tips is when you're at the grocery store, linger a little bit longer in that produce section because there are all kinds of fun goodies hiding that you don't necessarily recognize. It's kind of like walking through Trader Joe's. You got to look for those little things in the middle to get the good stuff, and I feel that way about the produce section.
And didn't you say you found some strange root vegetable or something that you'd never seen before?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
So that was kind of fun.
I've taken Kristen's tip. Yeah, I think of that many times. Just think of the vegetables that you can go through and look at them, and you don't know what it is, or you've haven't tried it a different way. You always eat it the same way. Just be creative out there, because we know there's a lot of scientific fact backing up the idea that we should eat more plants and consume less meat, that overall we would be healthier. It'd be healthier for our world.
And Kristen, I think you also, addressed the 80-20 rule, maybe, where you can't be perfect 100% of the time.
Right. Include comfort foods with your nutritious foods. They don't need to be polarized.
Yeah.
I like the 80-20. It gives us the freedom, right? The 80-20 rule seems to apply from everything from sales to, I don't know, how your hair grows, but it does apply to nutrition, being like 80% of the time, eat what you know you need to eat. Lots of plants, some legumes, get the fiber in, get the vegetables, water, fruits. But then the other 20% of the time, eat the food that you want to eat and enjoy it.
Yeah, it gives you freedom to just live your life instead of being so strict.
Right. And that's what you need to find your way to, is how do you accept this? I mean, because I think that is the end stage of the grief process, right? Acceptance.
Yes.
Accept it and then find the joy in your life. I mean, you still, and you talk about how, proud you are of yourself and the accomplishments that you made, and you reinforce that. I think that's wonderful for you and for all of us to take the time to recognize that, but to find something that makes life meaningful. And do it. And you wrote your book.
Seems easy, right? It seems easy to say, like, "Oh, be proud of yourself," but I don't know about you. Yeah, I can only speak for me. There's times where it's really hard, and not telling anyone else, literally just myself, like, "Wow, that was kick ass today. That's great. Yeah, that was good." Just to give yourself that praise.
Absolutely.
Much needed.
Great.
We talked about your advice for advocating for yourself and finding a good doctor. I also love the clever ways that you teach the reader to communicate their needs, because I imagine it could be so hard when you're sick, you're not feeling well, to over and over explain yourself or explain lupus or let people know how you feel. So I loved that. Can you share a little bit about the spoon method or theory?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. The spoon theory is basically an idea that let's imagine we create our own number. There's 10 spoons. You wake up every morning, and if you're healthy, you have 10 spoons, and you do things across your day that take away a spoon, right? Let's say it was a really congested road you drove on that was stressful to work. Maybe you take away a spoon. You go through preparing for some meetings. There goes another spoon. And at the end of the day, the goal is you use up your spoons. You go to bed and you wake up, and there in front of you are 10 healthy spoons. That's how it goes when you are, quote, a normal, healthy individual. But when you have lupus, tasks that typically may use one spoon may count for 2 or 3 or even more spoons. And so you go throughout your day, you have to be aware that maybe just the fact of waking up and getting dressed and, by taking a shower, that accounts for 3 spoons. You've used, that much out of the day already. And not only are spoons used quicker for simple things, but also at the end, they aren't always replenished. Sometimes you borrow from the spoons of the next day and you have even less to go with. So the spoon theory helps me because it allows me to come before the day begins, maybe even the night before, to think about, all right, what am I doing today? How much energy is that going to take up? Okay, I know I don't feel so great today, so let me prioritize what's the most important, and I'm just going to have to let some of these other things go. And it helps when you get your family members involved with that as well. Maybe they don't understand the spoon theory, but like Kristen said, you are often saying, how do you feel today? Bad. You get tired of your own self, like bad. I feel bad. Every day I feel bad. Yes, bad. And that's why I'd come up with like the number of 1 to 10.
Ranking,
1 being like, I'm awesome. 10, like, you better get me, to that doctor or to the hospital.
Yeah, don't
and that's
leave
an
my
easy
side
way
today.
Yes. You better worry.
Does your daughter live with you?
She does not. She lives in Charlotte.
Oh, okay. Because you were talking about a trip to Italy, which I thought was like, oh my God, you're gonna travel abroad. That's stressful just to think about. But you did share 2 of you with this disease traveling together, and it was not comical. It sounded like quite a challenge. And you were talking about being impatient with yourself or getting tired of hearing yourself say, I feel bad. You admitted that you kind of got a little short with your daughter when she was trying to tell you that she felt bad. And then you said, oh, you're right, and let's sit down and figure out how do we do this. So I think that having your counseling background has got to be a terrific bonus to you because you have insight into the way to talk to people. Even though you're human, you do have those tools at your disposal that some of the rest of us don't have.
Yeah.
I'm grateful to have that. Yeah.
And then you share it, which is great, with us.
Yeah. Well, and I hope to present the fact that I am just like the other women. I am fallible. I make errors all the time. I screw things up. But I thankfully have that small base or maybe a wide base that my health that allows me to prioritize these other things and put these habits into place that allows me to better manage lupus. That doesn't mean that, I still, like with my daughter in Italy and her being exhausted and her feeling, crappy to say it no other way, that I was short myself. I was tired myself. I was exhausted, but you know how it is when you're in these parenting relationships. It's always, with the best way. Like it is your children. How can I help you? I will keep myself quiet in order to help you. But having a daughter that has lupus and having lupus yourself is a very unique, thankfully, situation. Not the most common out there. And I'm grateful to be able to be a resource for her. I mean, she should be more grateful at times. I say, girl, read my book. But I understand that she is my daughter and, she has to find her own way. I get that. It is very challenging, though.
Yeah, I bet. Well, you talked about habits, and I want to get into that in a little bit. But the last really great communication tool you shared, I want to talk about as well, because I think these communication tools are great across the board. Like even, let's say, for someone's going through depression or other chronic illnesses that takes energy, more spoons to do things with. But if you're going through something or you're diagnosed with lupus or some other chronic condition, you get tired of telling people about that diagnosis, right? And you've had this idea to create a support caucus.
Yes.
I like that because I could see myself like not wanting to repeat over and over. So tell us about that idea a little bit.
Yeah, it came from 2 things. One, I was with the Lupus Foundation up on Capitol Hill speaking to Congress about lupus advocacy, and you kept hearing the word caucus, right? Big fancy word, and really it was just a bunch of people that come together. And I thought, wouldn't that be so nice to have a group of your people there so you don't have to call 6 people or tell your people. You could just bring everyone together, right? You sit around a couch and you say, like, here's what it is. Here's how I feel. Here's what the future looks like, and here's how you can support me during that time. And so that's where it came out of. And I think it it allows you to address everyone's concerns at one place. It allows everyone to get on the same page. This is a condition that can be deadly for some. At the minimal side, it is life altering, and that it's long term, it's chronic, it's an incurable disease. So when you have your people by you and they know what to expect, you're going to feel so much better supported and better cared for as you move into dealing with the uncertainties that comes with lupus.
Yeah. Well, you say that you're a lifelong health nut, and we'll say health geek since you're on the Health Geeks Book Club podcast. And that really had laid a foundation for you to take care of your body in the best way possible. And you write very comprehensively about all the habits that someone can have even when struggling with lupus. From stress management to exercise,
self-care.
And
actually, me reading it, who I don't have lupus, I thought, this is good advice for all of us. I mean, Kristen and I are reading a lot of literature in this area about, how to prevent chronic diseases or how to minimize them if you have them, or how to put off the bad outcomes. And we get similar advice. So I thought, man, you've read the same books we've read. It seemed like you were quoting Nidra Glover to we've read her, Mark Hyman, James Clear, Ryan Raphael, Kelly McGonigal, Dan Buettner, James Nestor, The Breathing Thing. Oh, God, we love that one.
Yeah.
And Brene Brown.
Some great people.
Yeah, so, I think you've tapped into some wonderful things that are kind of universal. And particularly important for you that have lupus to pay attention to. But the rest of us should pay attention too.
Well, the interesting thing is, I think us geeks right here, right, we know what these things are, but it is a noisy, right? That wellness space is very noisy.
That's what Rhonda says.
You could easily get the wrong message. If you haven't read Gospel of Wellness.
That's Rhonda Raphael.
Wow. Yeah. Yes, mind blown. I'm so grateful to have read her book while I was writing this book. I mean, I'm amazed that I could actually read a book while writing one. But there were many things in my book that I decided that I didn't feel like there was enough strong scientific backing to put in there. And I was so grateful to have had her book because she gave me the view and the perspective of like,
and permission
maybe this isn't enough.
Yeah, permission to believe your instinct there. It's like, my antenna are up for a good reason. Yeah.
Well, I think the reality is, like I mentioned in the book, that we think that we need big global sweeping things in life to deal with our health, right? I'm going to go vegan, raw, sugar, no sugar, and I'm going to climb Mount Everest and Kilimanjaro. We think these things are what makes us healthy. And it's these boring, unsexy things that we do every single day. These are the things that make up our health. So if people learned that it's just small things, right? They don't give them much fact because they're like, what? Just drink water? Okay. Or I just go sit outside, for 5 minutes. What's that going to do? Or can I just close your eyes and follow your breath? We overestimate or underestimate these small things, and we overestimate the big things and the progress we make through those. It is the small things you do each day.
Yeah, and we complicate our lives by making it too complex. It really doesn't need to be
absolutely.
Complex.
And I love, though, that you put all of this into one resource so that you don't have to read all the books that we've read to understand that. So thank you. And sorry, go ahead, Eleanor.
No, I was just going to kind of jump back to the epidemiology of what you're dealing with. You're look to be a Caucasian woman, and they say that the Black and Hispanic females 15 to 24, it's the leading cause of death.
Can you believe that?
No, I didn't. So I looked up what's the leading cause of death because I always said, it's in accidents for young people. That's what kills them. They're pretty strong, but it's accidents, and then it's domestic violence or murder and self-harm, suicide, that kind of a thing, and then infections. We've just been through COVID. That makes sense. But and then the next one is lupus, and it's like, oh my gosh. And for the proportionality of the numbers of women of racial diversity that get it, that's tough. And how the resources and getting access to resources and knowing how to advocate for yourself, which is a big part of what you're talking about. So, if this book was available to all these women, oh my gosh, what a gift it would be.
Yeah.
So
Now
hopefully,
It was
there.
very eye-opening. I knew something about lupus, right? When I had lupus, I Googled it like everyone else. I read all the books I was supposed to read. And when I started writing, that's when I was like repeatedly, you would hear me, I wrote at home, repeatedly saying around the house, this is terrible. This sucks. I can't believe this over and over, because it was just eye-opening to know what we were up against. And I've been to a few different conferences on lupus, and I sit and cry. That's just terrible when people talk about the stories about things that have happened to them, and I'm very sensitive to it, because it's not really about me. I'm like, my daughter, oh my gosh, my daughter, I worry about her, and it's really rough.
yeah. Have you read Awe, the book AWE?
I have not.
We
Do
just,
I need to?
Well, you might. I mean, it might be interesting because they talk about some health benefits from experiencing that and building that into your routine.
Yeah.
And then Next Level Metabolism. Have you read that one?
I believe I started on that. I think I started on that when I was writing the book.
Yeah. It popped up in my thinking when we were coming through all that. But the idea about, we still don't know what causes this condition, right? You just know that if you have four of those things, you've got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The autoimmune.
There is. So to get lupus, yes, it's still scientifically not proven, but the idea being that you have gene variations that may stay dormant, but when certain things happen, like for me, pregnancy, like for Anna, it was mono. These things, you need the environmental trigger, and combine those two first.
And that's
lupus
that
out and
epigenetic story that we're talking about. And that's why these day-to-day lifestyle things might be able to help modulate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a interesting idea, and I can't wait to see the next few decades of what science will tell us about lupus. And they have said that if we figure out the ideas behind lupus, we'll be able to help all autoimmune diseases. And the idea is because lupus affects so many people so many different ways, from just losing hair to losing a kidney. And if we can figure out the logistics behind it, it will impact all the others as well.
Yeah. Well, you were in some clinical trials, and that's impressive that you've submitted to that. That really helps move the dial along. And then you talk about all the pharmaceutical interventions and side effects from some of those. And then the CBT, cognitive-based therapy, being helpful because of the depression and the anxiety. Did you run into the emotional freedom technique, the tapping?
I have not. Tapping, yes.
You didn't mention that in there, and I was thinking, well, maybe that's part of this too. As many of these tools that are out there to help you.
What harm could it be, right?
Right.
I mean, a lot of those things, right? If it doesn't work, great. I mean, maybe you drive yourself a little crazy, but that's it. A lot of the things, there were many ideas that I had out there, but I wanted to make sure that I could pull a lot of scientific data behind it instead of it being more, as we know, psychology is a softer science. So I wanted to pull some hard facts behind it. But, I think someone was just asking me the other day about some of the, what homeopathic things would you do for lupus? And, I will often tell people, like, what works for you? Like, I'm not here to tell you one way or the other. I think a lot of it does rely on the individual to make their choice. We know some things that are, hard nosed, but overall, if you want to get your tarot cards read and you think that's great, great, perfect, go for it.
Yeah.
But EFTs are an interesting one.
I think that goes back to your self-care formula, which I thought was fun. And, we talked about the gospel of wellness, and that author talks about self-care can be many different things. It's not what the wellness industry wants us to think. And so, Amanda, you have self-care is whatever the hell you want it to be, as long as it, 1, doesn't hurt anybody, 2, is legal in your state or country, and 3, brings you joy. So,
yeah.
That's great, right?
I think that's the easy way to think of it. Yeah. Absolutely. You want to isolate, at a party and go up in a room and read a book? Great. No problem.
That's right.
Yeah, I had put it's legal, and then someone had said, "Well, it's not legal in every state. I'm like, okay.
Gotta put that in there.
So whatever you want, right? Whatever you want out there. Yeah. I like the idea of not having self-care be a Band-Aid, right? It's not just a drink I consume or just some dress I decide I need to go buy, but self-care is the hard choices that we make, that to prioritize what you need and to take away things that you might not find to be as helpful for you. And they have to deal also, with boundaries. I learned a lot about boundaries. It was a really interesting read. It allowed me to definitely think about my own boundaries and sharpen those boundaries out there. And I think overall, if I look across, our country, most people don't love boundaries. They don't love confrontation. But when your health is on the line, you're going to have to make a choice. And often it comes to setting those boundaries that are most important for you.
Yeah, I think that was a really important part of your book, and just encouraging others to keep those boundaries. Another important part was that mental health section. You talked about grief. And grief is something I've grown more and more aware of lately, that it's not just about losing a loved one. There's grief often shows up when you get a diagnosis like lupus.
Yes.
Oh, such another important thing to include here and let people know that it's normal to go through that.
Yeah. I think at first for me, I had it. And then I decided they give you a drug, medicine, you take it, and then you're like, okay, I took it. Let's go. Let's continue on with my life. But when you learn the finality of it and the days pull into months, into years, it gets overwhelming. And you're like, not again. How do I have to deal with this? And so I like to think of it as grieving. And as we know, grief isn't linear. Step 1, step 2, step 3. It is.
Although you did give them to us. You did identify them for us. Yes, which was good.
Oh, yeah. But meaning they don't always go. Yeah, you don't go straight forward. You come back and you twist around, and sometimes you go upside down. But allowing yourself just to go through the process and knowing that it's okay, that we all go through it.
Yeah, and you
can be mad. Yeah, there's dads. You can be mad. You can yell. You can be like, "Why me? This sucks." And I've had those moments too.
And you give a little piece of advice for each stage of grief that you might be in, which I thought was helpful. And you just don't think about this until I've experienced too with clients that you grieve, like even if you develop a food allergy, now you're never going to be able to have that food, or you grieve just losing a part of your life that you may not get back.
Job losses are big.
Yeah. I think we should give people the space to have that grief. Yeah, when something becomes out of your control or something you really want in life is now limited to you, it's a way to grieve, to grieve that loss, to let it go, to not just be like, oh, it's been pulled from me, I can't have this anymore, but to go through understand the process and allow yourself to work through it, makes things more manageable.
And it's good to know that even someone with such a robust background in wellness has that to go through, right? I like that you showed yourself in this, and I'm human too, and so I've been through all of these stages, or I've fought with this. I didn't want to take medication right away, and so it was just nice that you showed up and were vulnerable in that way, so that people can feel like, yeah, she's human, I'm human. This is just the process we go through.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. It was very vulnerable to share some of these things, right? You try to say like, hey, I know something, but let me show you how I screwed up on a bunch of things. But I hope that resonates, so that people know, like, it's okay, right? We have to allow ourselves. Our society has to allow people to make errors and then learn from them. Because what are we without that?
And I also think it's interesting that you talk about your husband, I'm going to call him a caregiver, which he's not, but he's a partner in this with you. And, what he had to learn and what he has to do, I mean, when you're a couple and one of you has something that they didn't have when you started, it's an adjustment too. And it sounds like you all are doing very well.
Yeah, we're normal. We have our days.
I'm sure you do.
Right? Yeah, we go back and forth. Just the normal part of having a marriage for 2.5 decades or so. But I mean, having someone, certainly a woman who's often the caregiver who coordinates everything in a family suddenly be like, I can't today. I can't. Like, I don't know. You figure it out yourself. And, having to turn those roles around is challenging for, I would imagine, all relationships. And that's why, there were I didn't include it in the book, but I did a lot of interesting research. I was trying to figure out if people who were in a relationship or a marriage had lupus or another severe disease, if divorce increased. And so the interesting thing was when a woman was sick, that of course made it much worse for the relationship. But when a man was sick, it was just fine, which is not a surprise, right?
No.
I know. Shocker. But overall, I couldn't find that lupus increased, divorce, which is very nice to know.
Yeah. Well, speaking of support, I liked that you told people what to say and what not to say.
Yes, that's what I was getting at. Yeah.
So I do want to share these if it's okay.
Yeah, go ahead. Please, go ahead.
So if someone conveys that they're struggling through something, here are some things you can say. Thank you for sharing what's going on with you. I'm here for you. Take your time. I'll be here when you're ready. You have a beautiful heart. Lupus can't touch this. How can I best support you? Tell me more about lupus and how it affects you. And I love spending time with you even when you're not okay. Now, can you tell me some things that you heard that were like, oh, you shouldn't say that?
Oh, there's so many.
I'm sure.
Can I connect you to my chiropractor? Have you done yoga? And I'm like, yes, I'm a yoga instructor. Have you gone gluten-free? Someone at the gym the other day must not have seen me for a while, and he's like, "Whoa, you look different. What's wrong with you?" He's such a nice guy. Yeah. Your muscles are smaller. I'm like, yeah. I don't want to tell him, like, he's just going on, and I'm like, look, I have lupus now. Oh, girl, you're going to get over that. No, I won't. Then I'm getting like increasingly, no, I won't. Yeah, you will. You got to think positive. By then you're like going to drop kick the guy. Just everyone thinking that I understand. So here's the thing. When someone tells you something bad, most people don't understand lupus, right? So they're like, oh, hang in there, lady, hang in there. Yay. So they don't understand it. So they don't know what to say. And then 2, they become uncomfortable by the fact that someone they know has something that might be painful. And 3, if they learn that this is maybe more of a serious condition, that allows, triggers them to be like, oh, I don't deal with death or illness, so I don't know what to do. So I'm just going to tell you to be positive. And that will allow me to feel better in telling you that advice. And, as you read through the book, it's a bunch of crap. That toxic positivity is really hurtful because it allows the person who's receiving this advice feel like they're weak, that they're not capable. And maybe if they did just think better, that they could think themselves healthy. But that is not true.
Yeah, gosh.
If only.
A PSA we all need.
Well, there was a research before I didn't include in the book, but I remember reading that they did a study with people who had cancer, and they studied people who were really positive, who focused on, I'm going to get over this, all of those things. And they found no difference between the people who were like, this sucks, versus the ones who are like, I'm going to get better. And I thought, wow, that's quite fascinating.
That is.
So maybe we just allow that person to be who they need to be, and maybe we just support them however they need to. What a novel idea.
Amen to that.
We don't often think about.
Yeah. Well, the Girlfriend's Guide to Lupus is easy to understand, supportive, encouraging, and spunky, and chock full of information. So well done. Such a pleasure to read it.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
And I do hope that providers will find out about this book, because when they are laying this information on somebody, to be able to give them something. I have heard so many stories of people getting a diagnosis and then shown the door with no, what's next? What do I do next? And you kind of described that in your journey.
It's very common.
Yeah, it's like, well, okay, and I got lupus. That's great. Well, I know what it is, but what do I do? Just lost. And so this is a way not to be so lost. You're offering a handout through the book, and because you can't be with everybody, and a book is one way to kind of maybe be with more people.
And are there other
let someone know
ways?
they're not alone.
Are there ways to get connected to you, Amanda?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I have a website, amandachay.com, Chay. That was available. No one had taken that baby. I'm on YouTube. I've started posting videos on YouTube, which is a lot of fun about lupus. And then on Instagram, I'm at Amanda E. Chay.
Awesome.
Great.
And I appreciate the comment you made earlier, Kristen, about this book being applicable to other people or to other conditions. I think that was some of the first feedback I got on the book. Like, I have Hashimoto's. I wish this book was written for that. And I'm like, well, I was so focused on lupus, but if anyone else, caregivers or anyone's, other individuals can grab a nugget of information from this, I am happy to be able to provide that as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, I'm Eleanor Russell at 360health4u.com. And happy to talk about the books we've been reading. And if anybody wants to talk to me about wellness practices, I'm out here.
And I'm Kristen Norton, one of the registered dietitians at Well Balanced Nutrition. You can find us at wellbalancednutrition.com.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, friends. I appreciate the opportunity.
Awesome. Well, everybody have a great day.
Views and opinions stated in this podcast are solely those of the contributors and are not necessarily those of our distributors or hosting company. This podcast is copyrighted, and no part can be reproduced without the expressed written consent of Kristen and Eleanor.